we suspect that given what Mr. Trump said on the campaign trail, that there's going to be a number of changes and policies that could affect the rights of detainees, deportees, refugees, and asylees. And I've listed a number of them on that page here, there. And it's a long list. Some of them are duplicative, and I've duplicated them simply because I want to perhaps emphasize more some of them. I may not go through all of them. It's in the materials which you can read up, but I want to talk about a few of them. And I'm going to ask you first of all to go with me as I go one by one through some of them, the ones that I intend to cover. But let me go back and just say one thing which is important, is that since his election, Mr. Trump has in fact advanced an agenda that does not necessarily reflect what he promised on the campaign trail. Comments he made since his election have in some cases rolled back stances that he took during the campaign. I think the big beautiful wall, for instance, he pledged to build along the entire U.S. border is now a combination of walls and fencing. And the pledge to immediately deport all 11 million unauthorized immigrants using a deportation force now appears to be limited to a subset of those with criminal convictions, which is not any different from the focus that Obama had when he was the president. We know that campaign promises do not always translate into policies, but immigration is an exception this year, and one is still, concerned that there are going to be significant changes that could affect the rights of a number of immigrants, in the United States under this administration. And you can see that even by the nomination of Jeff Sessions as the Attorney General, who is a hardline anti-immigration senator as the Attorney General for the United States. So now let's go through some of these possible changes. And I say possible because they may not be possible to effect. Now, the first is banning Muslim immigrants. Yes, the U.S. has the power to ban or stop almost anyone from coming to the United States. In fact, previously, we have excluded Chinese, Southern Europeans, Jews, and all sorts of other undesirables, quote unquote. And even more recently, after 9/11, we enacted the special registration for people from certain majority Muslim nations. Although this was not a ban, but it was a restriction on those already here. And then for people seeking visa overseas, it's very easy for the Trump administration to deny visas to applicants from majority Muslim countries or those who are Muslim. And this could be done even without congressional action. That is the significance here. Anybody who has applied for a visa anywhere in the world knows that a consular officer can decide to deny you visa for any reason or no reason at all. And you don't have a right of recourse. You cannot challenge in the court of law. You simply have to come back another time. And in some cases, when you are denied a visa, you may not be able to reapply until a long period of time. Now, there are policy implications for that. Nations will react. Even Republicans in Congress may not be fully support of a blanket attempt to deny visas to applicants from majority Muslim countries. So that probably will not happen as a blanket ban, but it is fair to expect that in granting visas, that consular officers in all the embassies and consular offices around the world for the United States will be instructed on this administration to limit and be much more restrictive in granting visas to certain people from certain parts of the world. That, I think, is something that can be done, particularly given Mr. Trump's inaugural address, where he really has taken a protectionist a position, when he declared, and I'm paraphrasing here, from this day forward, let it be heard in any halls of justice, halls of power, any foreign nation, that it's going to be America first, which means I don't think that this administration is going to be concerned about the role of America as the leader of the free world, and they will do what they think is in the best interest of America. But all of that is something that will leave we need to see. Now, the next thing is refugees. Now, in just this last year, according to Pew Research, we accepted about 85,000 refugees under Obama. I think this was mostly in response, to the Syrian, refugee crisis. In my view, I think the response was tepid because there was really way more that could have been taken into the country. But what is significant is that traditionally, the majority or plurality of refugees that we accept are Christians. But in the fiscal year 2016, for the first time since 2006, the majority, 44% of refugees resettled in the United States were Muslims. So now, President Trump is in a position to affect the number of individuals that come into this country as refugees. And that can be done through policy, okay? He has to consult with Congress and come up with a number, but he could reduce or eliminate the number of refugees coming to the US, or he could shift the focus away from Muslim, refugees entirely and then focus on others. The point here is that this is one thing that effectively a Trump administration can put into place, and I think they intend, to do that. Now, the next thing to talk about are Asylees and Muslim refugees who are already in the United States. What do you do with them? People who are here with lawful statutes, this is more difficult. You can't really do anything about them, okay? And to remove them, there's a procedure. You got to present one's case to an immigration judge, and then the judge will then determine whether the person is eligible to remain in the United States or not. But people who have already qualified for protection under U.S. law because of our ratification of international treaties, they can't simply be removed. And to remove them is a long process. And given that they already qualify for protection under current law, they cannot be deported. So changing obligation under international law takes a long period of time, and it's going to be extremely difficult. In my view, it's going to be difficult, for the Trump administration to address people who are already here. Now, those who have asylum cases that are pending, they also have the benefit of due process protections because they cannot be deported unless and until a judge in immigration court determines that they do not qualify to remain in the United States. Now, even people from majority Muslim countries will benefit from these protections, and they are rights that are sometimes under the domestic and international law. And to change this again will require congressional action. It's not clear that the Trump administration will be able to, or will have the necessary support to enact such sweeping changes. The bigger issue will be how does the Trump administration allocate its resources towards the asylum cases. I think that using the allocation of resources, increasing resources, will be difficult because what it will mean will be that there going to be a mass hiring of immigration judges to hear a lot of cases. There are already profound delays in the system from what I gathered from my research, although I don't practice this area. It takes about 2 years plus for you to get a hearing, and the backlog is just unending, and there are so many cases in the system. So it's going to be very difficult to process people who are in the system already and get them out of here because they don't qualify. So that's going to be a very difficult thing to do. Now the wall. Now, since the election, like I said before, the beautiful wall has now become a combination of fences and walls. But one thing is fair to say, Trump is not the first to propose a wall. I mean, as far back as in the 1990s, the US started with a 66-mile fence in the San Diego area. And I believe in 2006, the US had built in various parts of the country over 650 walls or fencing, around the country. And there were difficulties, in doing that, and technologically, in terms of resources, in terms of resettling people, and that has been a problem, generally, speaking. So it's going to be very difficult, in my view, to build a blanket wall. I don't think that he's going to do that anyway, given what he has said since election. So I'm going to skip up and move to removal of unauthorized immigrants. It is within Trump's authority to revise Obama's administration's November 2014 enforcement guidelines that place a low priority on unauthorized immigrants who have little or no criminal history. And that can be done through executive order also. And changing the enforcement priorities could increase the number of non-citizen removal proceedings. And that could mean that you're going to have a large scale removal of people who are subject to deportation. Now, regardless, they will still be entitled for removal to due process. In other words, they cannot just be removed without a court hearing of some sort. There has to be a hearing, and they have to be determined that they should be removed, but they can be removed. And that will take some time also, to address. One thing to bear in mind is that during the campaign, Donald Trump condemned the so-called sanctuary cities, New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Philadelphia, San Francisco, Seattle, and even Minneapolis, and threatened to withhold federal funding and federal assistance to those cities. It's going to be interesting to see how all this plays out in the next 4 years, because these states and these cities have traditionally provided sanctuary to immigrants. In New York, where I live, I know that the New York City in particular has an ID program that is open to anybody, regardless whether you are documented or not. And with that, you can have access to government services. And that is totally in stark opposition to the policy of the federal government. And it will be very interesting to see how all of this plays out. Now, the other thing I would like to quickly talk about, and I don't have too much time left, is rescinding deferred action. Deferred action for childhood arrivals is a program that was passed in 2012 by Obama that allows qualified unauthorized immigrants brought to the United States as children to apply for work authorization and protection against removal. Now, Obama put that into law, and I believe just recently, I think Trump announced in the past few days that he, in fact, will rescind that. That he has decided to rescind that. So that will have an effect, and you can see the numbers, that have received, the renewals, over a 2-year period, on the slide there. Okay, moving on. I think we've talked about reducing refugee flows and increasing security checks, indirectly. I'm not going to, deal with that. I've kind of talked on curbs on legal, immigration, so I'm not going to talk about it. I'm going to allow you to just, read it, at your leisure, on the slide. But certainly, there's going to be a limitation on the number of legal permanent residents that come into the legal immigration that comes into this country. The concern, about the H-1B, which is the professional visa status, will kind of play out because according to Trump during the election, it's been abused, and he probably will do something, about that. But one thing is clear: one is not really clear, this early in the administration, what the administration will do. But regardless, whatever comes out of any of these policies, one would suspect that there's going to be a lot of challenge through lawsuits or some other initiatives.